Hello and welcome to another painting video. In this video I'll be painting scenery of the new Warcry box set. Several boxes of Gnarlwood have already been released, but this is the scenery of the first one. I really wanted to try to paint the fleshy trees as gnarly as I could. I can tell you it was quite a mess to paint, but overall I liked the effect I achieved. Let me tell you how I painted this set. After priming all the scenery black, I created a zenithal highlight with white primer. I want a white base because I'll be adding a lot of contrast paints. The first contrast paint is Guilliman Flesh. This is a very neutral skin tone and will serve as the base for the muscle tissue look these trees will be having near the end. To add a bit of variety to the large trees, I add Fyreslayer Flesh to random parts all over. It's not a big deal if you hit some of the other elements of the scenery, because everything will blend together later. Next, I shade the trees with a very watered down Carroburg Crimson. As you can see, I'm doing everything with an airbrush. This really cuts down on painting time with large pieces of scenery, and I can really recommend you get one. On the thicker parts and parts that look like limbs, I spray Druchii Violet on the trees. This makes it look like bruised skin. This is a nice base coat for the trees and with the airbrush easy to apply. Next, I'm going to highlight and change the color slightly. I'm going to add a couple of paints using dry brushing. First, I use Bugman's Glow. Second, I use Cadian Fleshtone. The veins on the trees really catch the dry brushing nicely. Third dry brush is Kislev Flesh. I'm focusing more on the branches than the trunk. Fourth dry brush is Flayed One Flesh, which is mostly focused on the tips of the branches to make them lighter. The trees look a little bit too Caucasian and not really muscly, so I'm spraying the tree with a watered down Voluptuous Pink. On the branches I spray a mix of Voluptuous Pink and Titanium White to brighten the tips of the trees. And I end with a final dry brush of Pallid Wych Flesh all over. Now the trees look a lot more like muscle fiber. I'm going to paint the rest first before adding the final gore step to really make them look gnarly. There are lots of skulls and bones on these models, so let's do them next. I first base coat all the bone with Ushabti bone. I try to avoid hitting the tree, but it happens. No problem though, everything will blend together later anyway. Next, I spray Skeleton Horde. This shades the bones and alters the hue a little bit. Still not enough shading for my liking, so I spray on Agrax Earthshade on all the parts where I want to have a deeper shade. Next is dry brushing time. I keep it simple. I first dry brush Ushabti bone all over. Then I add a final dry brush of Screaming Skull to further highlight the skulls and bones. A simple way to paint bone. Another way would have been to primarily use the airbrush and make gradients. It's a different style, but could have worked as well. Next, I'm adding some green into the scenery. I first spray Plaguebearer Flesh on all the bamboo. This yellowish green is a great base for anything jungle. Next, I spray Seraphim Sepia on the bamboo. This darkens the previous base coat and adds some nice reddish shade to everything. I add some Iyanden Yellow in patches here. This adds more color variety and makes the bamboo look more natural. I end with a dry brush of Nurgling Green. When dry brushing the bamboo, go over the length instead of perpendicular. This will look a lot better as it adds streaks across the length of the bamboo. Another thing to note is that I've also added these steps to the ground bits of all the scenery. The ruins get a spray of Basilicanum Grey. Because I sprayed the ground with the previous step, the contrast paint works really well with the green, creating a mossy looking stone. I'm adding 2 dry brushes to highlight. First, I dry brush Dawnstone. Then I dry brush Administratum Grey to the upper parts of the ruins. For good measure, I'm spraying some Plaguebearer Flesh to the ruins to make them look even more mossy. These ruins and rocks really stand out nicely between all the natural colors I've already added. Let's finish the scenery with some small details before goring up everything. I'm spraying the horns with Leviadon Blue. Because the horns are quite big, I don't mind adding some highlights here. First I dry brush with Thunderhawk Blue. And then I dry brush Fenrisian Grey on the horns. Next comes a very time-consuming part. I'm painting all the thorns or claws of the trees with black Templar. Next, I'm highlighting all the rope I can find with Karak Stone. With these last 2 steps, just try to add a base color and a small highlight. Putting more effort into this is not going to be noticeable on the tabletop anyway. Alright, on to the fun part. First, I make a mix of Flesh Terror Red and Contrast Medium. I used a pipette to make this mix flow between the tree trunk's recesses and squirted it on the branches. It took me a while to get the correct consistency so it would actually stay put. As you can see here, this is what happens when it's too runny. Just go nuts here and let the mix flow everywhere. With a piece of foam, I am stippling on Blood for the Blood God on the scenery. Mostly to cover up any weird streaks from the previous step or adding blood to places I might have forgotten. I dry brush Pallid Switch Flesh back on the tree to break up the blood effects a little bit. Then I add a final dry brush of Lothern Blue to make some of these veins look blue. Adds to the muscle effect. And I end with spraying all the trees with Ardcoat, which is a glossy finish to make them all shiny and protect the scenery as a bonus. And here we have some gnarly looking flesh trees, ready to strike out at unsuspected adventurers. I thought these trees looked great, so I'm glad I was able to paint them. These are surely going to be a staple on my Age of Sigmar table, or of course Warcry. I bought the standalone box for this scenery and actually found out I'm missing 1 tree. Why did they not include that in this set? It's really weird. But anyway, I'll be back with another Warcry related video soon. In the meantime, be sure to check out my Instagram where I post pictures of current projects and behind the scenes stuff. But for now, thanks for watching.